The Sage Women podcast shares real conversations with women and health professionals, and it's for anyone navigating the ups and downs of midlife. It's Melanie again on the Sage Women podcast, and I'm really pleased to introduce Gabrielle Dolan, who is a best-selling author and global expert in business storytelling. And we'll talk about a few things today, including her latest book, Story Intelligence, which is exploring really something very timely and how authentic storytelling is even more powerful in a world saturated with AI content. And it's all about trust. So, Gabrielle, thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Melanie. I'm excited to be talking about all things storytelling.
Could you give us like a little nutshell background of you and how you became a professional storyteller?
Yeah. So I used to work at National Australia Bank, and I started my career there in technology and then moved into L&D and change management roles. And it was in those change management roles, this is probably going over 20 plus years ago, that I started to realize the power of storytelling. And I sort of thought, when I share a story, people seem to get the message better. And, it wasn't a silver bullet, but it seemed to work. And then I started to notice that the really good leaders that I would love to work with were sharing stories. The brilliant presenters were sharing stories. I knew the great salespeople and the great teachers shared stories. So it was 21 years ago, to the day almost, that I left my corporate career and decided to teach people storytelling. I knew it was a skill. I absolutely knew it was a leadership skill, a communication skill, an influencing skill. I had, done a lot of designing and delivering of leadership programs. So I knew I could design and deliver leadership programs. So I just thought, I'll give this a go. The kids were 2 and 5 at the time, and I just thought, if it doesn't work out, I'll spend a couple of years home with the kids and go back and get another job. But 21 years on, it'd be fair to say it's worked out.
Amazing. And I was just saying to you before, I do have this book.
You
For those
do?
who can see it, Stories
Stories
from Work.
Yeah.
This is so good. I actually use this for preparing for podcasts where I'm being interviewed. I go, what are some anecdotes I can use to bring dry, boring content to life, create that emotional engagement, and really hook people in and get them interested in listening to the end of the episode?
Yeah, excellent. Well, that's the first part. The first key to good storytelling is to actually go, what story could I use here? A lot of people don't even ask themselves that, so they never share stories.
And that makes it hard, right? Because you don't have a framework, and then you think, well, how do I do it? I've got some things that I've been through. What do I do with that? How do I tell it in a way it doesn't sound like a me story?
Yeah, absolutely. And seriously, Melanie, some people, when I run workshops, like, I go into organizations and run workshops, I will have people come up to me, and they're normally older, and say, it has never occurred to me to share a personal story to communicate a business message. And that's where I focus. I mean, there's different types of stories you can share, but I think your personal stories are the most powerful and the most underutilized in business. So it's almost like they've just never thought it's professional, or it works, or why does it work. That's changing more and more. A lot of people now are seeing storytelling as a way to get their message across. So I'm seeing less of people saying, I never even thought about it. But once you've thought about it, once you've asked yourself the question, of course, then it is, well, what's the right story to share? How do you share it? How do you start it? How do you end it? I don't want to feel braggy, like you said. It was like, yes. So there's a real skill, as I assumed 21 years ago. There's an absolutely skill in doing it effectively in business.
It's such an important skill too. It's the relational part of leadership, and what we do in work is so critical, and story really makes those links, doesn't it? And I actually wanted to start with something from your latest book and weaving in some of the conversations that I've been having a bit later. But you've defined the term story intelligence. Now, we know about emotional intelligence.
We do.
And the intelligence quotient, the IQ. What is story intelligence?
Yeah, so that's the title of my book, and I really liked that. When I thought of it with the help of AI, but not using AI fully. AI suggested narrative intelligence, and I really do not like the word narrative. But I thought, oh my God, but I love story intelligence. So I like the link to emotional intelligence, because like, sometimes the very good storytellers have high emotional intelligence as well. So I knew I wanted to call the book Story Intelligence, and I thought, oh, I wonder if there's a dictionary definition of it. And of course, there wasn't. So I had to sort of craft my own definition of what that meant. And this took a long time. It looked like so. To me, story intelligence is the ability to purposefully and skillfully use authentic storytelling to communicate with clarity and to connect, engage, and inspire. So a bit of a mouthful, but the key elements there is, to purposefully and skillfully, authentic. I think authentic storytelling is important,
Yeah.
and it is about why do we do it? It's because we want to communicate with clarity and we want to connect and engage and inspire. And you spoke about just before that in leadership, relationships are critical. Stories have the power to fast track relationships and trust and credibility, and to actually strengthen them. And that's almost like the added benefit of using personal stories. So that's my definition of story intelligence.
I love that too. And I can think of an example of somebody saying recently they'd done so many leadership courses and they would not spend another dollar on a leadership course because the women that were delivering the sessions seemed like they had it all together. There was no vulnerability, there was no story about the journey they'd been on. It was just a whole bunch of facts and almost like a formula that you can follow too. And I thought,
Mm.
wow, that must be really hard for somebody looking for that kinship and that I'm not alone, and then seeing someone who seems unreachable in that leadership role because they're just not being vulnerable.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The most powerful stories you can share are vulnerable stories. Now, not all stories need to be vulnerable, and when I talk about vulnerable, I'm not talking about oversharing or crying or getting people to cry.
Phew.
But the most the most powerful stories people leaders can share is when they've got it wrong, when they've screwed up, when they've stuffed up. A lot. So, predominantly the work I do is in-house workshops,
Mm.
um, and it's training the leaders on storytelling to communicate values is a values, purpose, or strategy. And so I take them through this process, right? So say, for example, one of their values is integrity, and I take them through a process, go, well, what do you really mean by that? And they'll say a few things, and I keep going, what do you really mean? And let's just say they mean, what do we mean by integrity is if you say you're going to do something, do it. I go, right, so now we need to find a story. But the most powerful, if you share a story about, so Melanie, if you shared a story with me about, I said I was going to do something and I did it. It was like, well, good on you. Like, what do you want, right? The most powerful story you can share is when you said you were going to do something and you didn't do it. And, you can talk about the regret you have. And through that story, first of all, if I'm working for you, I go, oh, so you're normal, you're human. But it also shows that living these values every single time is hard and no
Mm.
one does it. So it's those stories of when you've stuffed up can really, we talk about being more human in our leadership. That's what being more human is having, the courage. And sometimes it does take courage to say, yeah, this is what I did. This is like, God, I bloody stuffed that up so much.
Yeah.
So, and
Yeah,
I
and it's
think,
not just paying lip service to values, then it's showcasing that those things are important to you and
yeah,
that you're bummed that you didn't
yeah,
do
yeah,
that
yeah.
thing.
I truly believe that you cannot implement, in inverted commas there, values without stories. Yes, you have to live them, but saying, oh, our value is integrity. And what that means to us is, when you say you're going to do something, do it. Like, so what? They are just words on a wall. It's only through the leaders sharing stories, what it really means to them, that those values come alive. And I think if you're a leader thinking you have to be proof and have all the answers, not make mistakes, I reckon it's a really outdated model of leadership. I had an interesting, and especially for young people, I think too. So my daughter is 25. She's literally just been in the workforce for 2 years, and I do a podcast called Keeping It Real with Jack and Ral. I'm the Ral of that duo. But she said to me the other week, she goes, Mum, could you do a podcast sharing stories about when you and other people have made mistakes and it's worked out, as in they've made mistakes, but where are they now? She goes, because as a young person, when you make a mistake, you just think it's the worst thing in the world. And it would be really good to listen to all these really successful people that look like they've got it all together. And you know what you said, they've got it all sorted, but the mistakes they made when they were potentially younger. And I said, yeah, let's do that. So we did it. And it was like, people have been loving that episode.
Yeah. It makes sense, like you say, humanizing it. And I would almost call that happy mistakes.
Yeah.
It's mistakes that saved you from a tragedy and actually helped you grow and follow a better course, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think all mistakes, I mean, and like it's the key to things. If you make a mistake, own it and learn from it, like
Yeah,
like, don't they say like a mistake's not a mistake as long as you learn from it?
exactly. I
Yeah.
agree. So for me, in coming into this episode, I mentioned before we set this time to
Hmm.
meet is that I'm noticing a lot of women, especially in midlife, hormones are all
Hmm.
over the place, brain
Hmm.
fog, memory, slow processing, but perhaps already with a tendency feeling the pressure to get their words right. And I have been there myself in the past. So they're over preparing, they're going into meetings or even coaches I know that are professional coaches wanting a script to take into a coaching conversation, which you
Yeah.
can't because it's supposed to flow. So there's a lot of self editing going on. Why do you think that happens?
Mm, yeah. So a couple of things. First of all, can I just say, we as women, we're often very harsh on ourselves about menopause brain and brain fog and baby. When you're pregnant, is like
Baby
and
brain.
baby brain and stuff like that. Which I'm not. I'm going through. I'm not dismissing it, but you just reminded me when I was pregnant with our first child. I came home one week and I said to my husband, "Oh my God, I've got such baby brain. I can't believe twice this week I went into meetings with the wrong folder." And he goes, "Oh, I would do that like twice a day." So I think sometimes we're being harsh on ourselves.
Ah, yeah, yeah.
Um, I often have women, and it's mostly women that say this to me. So when we're talking about sharing stories in business, they will go, "Yeah, look, I want to share stories, but I just don't want to feel like I'm bragging." And I go, "No, well, you don't want to brag." And then they'll go, "I worked with this person once," and it's normally a guy. I don't want to gender stereotype, but it was
Yeah.
like, "I worked with this person once, and all they did was tell stories about how great they were, and I don't want to be like that person." And I go, "Well, don't be like that person." And the fact that I always say the fact that you've actually said, "I don't want to be like that," means you will never be like that. So you're so conscious of not being like that. So I think sometimes we think telling stories, it's about bragging, and it's not about that. Even the fact I say, if you're sharing a story about, so sharing stories about when things didn't work out and the lessons you learned from that, they're really powerful stories to share. Um, Even if you're sharing stories about the good things you've achieved, it's you spend less time on the achievement and just talk about the lessons you learn along the way, the challenges you had to overcome, the growth you had and stuff like that. So you focus more on the process or the journey as
Mm,
opposed to the outcome. And
mm,
it's almost sometimes if the outcome is just a minor little thing, it sort of feels like it's more credible because you're not harping on that. You're just harping on, this was a real challenge, but I love the challenge, and these things happened, and we worked, we did whatever. And so I think what I'm saying is, if you think you don't want to share stories because you don't want to brag, the fact that you're even thinking that means you're probably not bragging.
It comes to mind the word judgment. Women, particularly, may be worried about being judged by other people as a braggart or as not good enough or something else. So they're thinking, how do I get my words right so that people think I'm smart, but I'm not overdoing it?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and then it actually ends up being a bit contrived, I suppose, because something you said earlier, you need courage to tell a good story.
Yeah. You did. Well, you need courage to share stories, and
Yeah.
courage to tell vulnerable stories. I think also too, and I see men and women with this, that sharing a story is like, I'll be judged. So you know what? I just stick with the facts and the figures and the data, and it's all a bit boring. I mentioned my podcast just before. Our most listened to podcast was a podcast on job interviews, and one of the tips my co-host Jack gave is that if you feel like you're not bragging when people go, oh, what are your strengths and all that, as
Yeah.
opposed to saying, well, I think I'm pretty good at blah blah blah. It's literally go, well, previous managers have told me I am excellent at this. Clients continually tell me I am brilliant at this. So it's no longer your opinion. It's no longer bragging. You are now stating facts. This is what other people have told me my strengths are. And you're just stating them. And then that takes away, well, this is not me saying it. This is what I'm just informing you what other people have told me. So I think I thought that was a brilliant technique
Yeah.
to, if you feel like you're not bragging. And can I also say, if you're going for a job interview, brag away. That is, if you're up on stage or you're a team, be mindful of that. But if you are going for a job interview, you are selling yourself. So brag, brag, brag like there is no tomorrow.
I'm glad that that's an okay thing to do. So everyone listening, please brag. And
Please do it, because I
I
can guarantee you your male colleagues are. And again, don't want
yeah,
to, just they are doing it, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's what you should be doing as well.
you make me think of the last time I went for a job interview, which might have been about 35 years ago,
So,
perhaps. And there's always that question, what are your strengths, but what are your weaknesses? And you
mhm,
and I remember talking to other people and it was like, I'm a perfectionist, but I've just managed that now so that I always do a good job at everything. We'd come up with these
exactly.
statements and you go,
Cliche.
oh, it's so corny.
Yeah,
I think what you've just given also is a framework for saying uh, there is a weakness and perhaps there's a growth moment in that and what I learned from that.
yeah. I tell you, I haven't been for a job interview for a very long time either. But if I was going for a job interview and someone said, so what are your weaknesses? First of all, in my head, I'd be going, such a cliche question. Are you still asking that? And this is how I'd respond with it. Am I allowed to swear on your podcast, Melanie?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would go, actually, that reminds me of a story I heard about an interviewer saying, what's your weakness? And the interviewee said, telling the truth. I just cannot help but tell the truth. And the interviewer said, I wouldn't consider that a weakness. And the interviewer said, I don't give a fuck what you think. I would answer it that way. I would, and I think first of all they would go, yeah, right, good, you're funny, good, uh,
Yeah.
and if they still went, but no, what is your weakness? I think you want to be prepared for that. And as cliche as it sounds, you do need to have, based on the job, like based
Mhm.
on, you know, like sort of thinking, what's a good thing of a job to, and sometimes it is. It's like God, I'm a reformed perfectionist. I used to spend so much time on that, but now I've realized that 80/20 is good enough and stuff like that.
Mm.
I mean, I know you know what? If they're asking a cliche answer or question, you
Give
feel
him a
free to give a
cliche
freaking
answer.
cliche answer. That's my,
I love it.
or maybe you go, what's your weakness? It's like putting up with stupid questions
So
in, not putting
what's
up with stupid questions in a job interview.
or yeah, what's yours? You tell me yours first and I'll tell you mine. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And so this kind of leans into AI now
Yeah.
because we're seeing more and more people using AI to craft messages. And there's a little bit of me that dies inside when I think about that. But I use AI too, but I use it
Hmm.
perhaps differently. And I guess I want to ask what's the line between using AI as a tool and then going too far and losing your authenticity?
Yeah. So you spoke about my book called Story Intelligence before. The subtitle is The Craft of Authentic Storytelling Made Smarter with AI. So it is using AI. This is my eighth book, Melanie, and I don't want to, I don't want to brag, but
You can
what the
brag
hell?
away. We already have permission for bragging.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes it's just do little pins. Like, oh, it's my eighth book. the last book I wrote was 4 years ago, and I was on storytelling, and I truly believed it would be the final book I would write on storytelling. There's only so much you can write. But I had people asking me, will AI replace storytelling? And I was actually horrified that these questions were being even asked. And it was like, no, no, not of course. Not, of course not. And then I would have other people go, can you use AI to help with your stories? Now, my initial response was, no, that's cheating. It's like, that's not authentic, blah, blah, blah. But I thought, well, I probably need to test this out. And so I did start to experiment. And I was surprised how good the AI, I was not pleasantly surprised. I was disturbingly surprised how good they are. And so in the book, I talk about how you can use AI. You don't have to use AI. And, I said before my definition of story intelligence, my editor at the time was saying, but you need to include AI in your definition of story intelligence because you've got AI in the subtitle. And I thought about it like for weeks if I included AI in the definition of storytelling. And I said no, because you can be brilliant at storytelling and never ever use AI. Like you don't need to use AI. But if you're going to use AI, use it as your creative partner. So in the book, I ran an experiment where, because the stories were pretty good, like the stories that AI gave back to me were pretty good, but they were missing something. And what they were missing was that connection. They were certainly missing authenticity because they weren't real. So I'm seeing, even though in the book I show people how they can use AI to help them find stories, and so use it as your creative partner. Like, can you ask me questions around innovation because I want to give a story about innovation, so I'll ask you, and you can use to refine it. I'm just about to write an article on the fact that the overuse of AI is making us lazy and ineffective and boring. So if we have an overuse on AI, if we fall into that trap of putting it through AI and it comes back and you go, oh, that actually sounds pretty good. Does it sound like you though? And is it authentically true? So, and it can sort of start to sound all the same. So we just need to be mindful to use it as your creative partner, but don't start to become lazy. And I was speaking to someone the other day, and they said, "Yeah, but it's actually it's efficient." I go, "Yeah, it might be efficient. Is it effective?" And when it comes to communication, I think we need to go for effective as opposed to efficient.
Absolutely. And thinking about being lazy and losing capability, I've heard stories that if you rely too much on AI, you can't retain that information because you haven't written it.
No,
Obviously, you've got to plug something in, and as you say, you're getting it to ask questions and challenge you. And I've done this myself. I remember going into a podcast where I was the guest, and I got AI to write me some answers to the questions, and I thought, I can't speak to this.
no,
It's
it's not you.
I actually had to sit down, and it took longer, but it was worth it because I went into that episode feeling really confident about what I was going to say, the anecdotes I might share. And I thought, wow, if I had just outsourced my thinking to I would feel less confident. And that's the whole point, the
Yeah.
conversation earlier about midlife women over preparing and so on. AI, if they're outsourcing the whole thing to AI, it's not going to help them. But if they use it wisely, then it can help them shape their words and perhaps feel more confident. Is that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And look, and then it's like any technology really. It's using it wisely, like use it for good, not evil. I heard a story the other day that people are starting to use AI in live interviews, and it was like, so they're virtual interviews, and they've got two screens up, and like the question gets asked, and it's probably audio, and the AI throws back responses of what they could say, and like it was just like, oh my God. Like now part of me thinks if you've got all these if it's all true, so if you've used something that's pumped something in, say, here's my skills, here are my stories, here are my examples, and that's almost used as a prompt, but then like the person telling me, he goes, you can see them reading from the other screen. And it was
Mhm.
just like, that's bad. That's bad. But
Oh, yeah.
but but they said that, like, they go, our we don't have a policy to say you can't use AI in interviews. So it's things like
Mm.
that. And and I sort of said, well, if they use it wisely, that could be an attribute to go, they actually used AI really wisely in that job interview. We didn't even know. I don't know. Maybe that's a good thing. Who knows?
The jury's out for me. We yet to
Yeah,
see
yeah,
it. I feel like, when you make pancakes and the first one's always a bit rubbery, I call it the one for the pan, and then the
yeah,
rest of
yeah,
the stack's good. I feel like
yeah,
we're there with AI. It's all over the place. Some are doing good things and some are doing
yeah,
bad things, and we're just figuring out that first pancake, and then hopefully
yeah,
it'll be okay after that. We'll settle
yeah.
down, have some guidelines and things.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, that we're at the moment with the first pancake, we're over for the creativity process you're talking about, which is you just don't outsource it. I actually, in the book, wrote a letter to AI. I was inspired by Elizabeth Gilbert's letter to fear that she wrote in Big Magic, and
Yeah.
it's literally about you can come along for the ride. You can have your input when asked, but you will never ever be in control. You will never be in the driver's
Mm.
seat. And I think it's just mindful that you never ever want to give over control to AI because it's efficient. Because again, it's not effective, and you're being lazy. And you know what? The worst thing is you're starting to sound like everyone else, and you're missing out on that opportunity to build relationships because something doesn't seem quite right. And
Yeah, and you
yeah,
lose that bit of trust, don't
yeah,
you?
yeah, yeah, yeah. It could do real damage to your brand and credibility.
I was speaking to someone earlier today, one of our partners, and she said, "Oh, I've been on Instagram and it's all a monoculture. Every post looks the same.
Mm,
There's just it's just homogenous."
yeah,
And
yeah,
the people that stand out are the ones that are not using AI for their final product story. The people who are,
yeah,
because you can
yeah.
start to see the
Or,
trends.
or they are using it, but using it wisely.
Yeah,
So you
yeah.
don't know. I think they're talking about. I mean, I know the LinkedIn algorithm changes all the time, but they're sort of saying that video is really good at the moment because it's you and you're talking. And yes, maybe you used AI to help with what you're going to say, but there's no denying it's actually you talking. Well, actually, it could be denying it's you talking because it could be a deep fake video. So,
I guess AI maybe AI doesn't swear, or it's probably
yeah,
other things that it
yeah,
doesn't do that are human, the spontaneous parts of us that make us interesting and unique. And
yeah.
that's the point, really, too, isn't it? If we want to stand out in a job market or as a business owner, showing up authentically as ourselves really matters.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I mean that's the whole job interview too. Like a job interview, people are trying to get to really know you. You don't want to go to a job interview and just, regurgitate your CV. You want to be sharing stories and stories that demonstrate your values as well as your strengths.
Mhm. So now I'm thinking about this four types of story that you talk about,
Hmm.
at least in this book, and I think it's in your new book too.
It's a different type of four types of stories.
Okay.
I've, I've had several four types of stories, which
Well, it's
yeah,
a good model.
and I've even had five types of stories. But
Okay.
in the latest book, I talk about the four types of stories, and one's personal, professional, public, and parable. So, the personal is what we're speaking about. What's happened in your personal life that you can relate to a business message or a business value. Your professional stories are like your work stories, so they're still yours. And then public stories are more, you just search for them and you'll find them, like case studies and stuff like that are public stories. And then parables are like fables and which are really powerful. But I think the two most powerful are your personal, professional, because when you share them, I get to know you a little bit better. I get to find out about you. But you just sharing a public story in a parable, that doesn't really happen.
That was going to be my question, actually, is which of those story types do you think women might be underusing and could perhaps use more often when they're preparing for a meeting or a presentation or something?
Yeah, look, I think generally I think everyone underutilizes the personal story. So, if you're preparing for a presentation or a job interview and you want to go, right, I want to share an example or a story around innovation, they will most likely go to a professional story about when they've innovated at work, which is totally fine. But you go, could you share a story of perhaps even when you're a little kid, like that shows that innovating has always been part of you, like you've just always done it.
Yeah.
I often share stories about my dad because he was like we always do the great ideas man, and I just share stories about hanging around with dad, and he would stick a hose on the end of the broom and like wash down the caravan, and this was like 60 years ago before.
Yeah.
And and so it was sort of through sharing those stories, it's sort of like, okay, I was raised in a household that innovation was just part of what we did. So it's sometimes though not sometimes those stories can give you credibility in the fact that I'm innovative, even though I haven't shared a work example of that, but so they can be more powerful, and I think everyone underutilizes them. Um, and I think especially if you're going in a job interview where you've had time away from work, so you might have been on, maternity leave, paternity leave, or you're changing industries or careers where the amount of professional work stories are limited. You can still be sharing stories of, you could be going for a project manager role and you might not have done project management before, but you used to, coach the kids basketball team, and you used to be on the parents and friends association or stuff like that. It was like, that's
Mm.
project management. Or you organize the family's holidays every single time, that's project management. So it's finding those personal stories that still demonstrate the values and or the skill without it having to be a work related one.
Mm. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about it's a bit like coaching. And when you sit down and reflect and write things, or even when you write your CV, you realize what you're capable of. And I'm wondering
Mm.
how much we learn about ourselves through telling stories.
Yeah, well, I think yeah, I think you're right, and I think when you're forced, or you force yourself to say, "Can I find stories of this?" and you really stick with it, I need stories. You'll find them, and the more stories you think of, you'll sort of go, "Oh yeah, yes, I have done this many of times, and yes, I am good at that. Yes, this is part of how I was raised." And I think that would give you confidence.
Mm. I have the sense that becoming good at storytelling and developing that as a skill is intrinsically linked with confidence, actually, just from what you've said today, from reading your book, because you've got something to anchor to your message that you want to get across suddenly comes to life through something that you know very well that you've experienced. So your ability to tell that in a confident and honest way is probably a lot better than trying to have rigid words on a page that
Yeah.
ChatGPT or anyone else has scripted for you.
Exactly. I've seen a lot of people that present, and you'd probably sort of say they're pretty dry presenters, and so I work with them on sharing a story or two, and it's like they're doing their presentation a little bit dry, and they get to the story, and it's just like, oh my God, it's a whole different person because um, it's their words. When you retell a story, you don't just retell it, you relive it, and you naturally just, and people see that, and it's like emotion is coming through.
Mm.
Look, you do have to craft your story. There is a structure that I take people through the book, and you do have to practice it, and you've got to do all that, so you've still got to put some work in it. It's not just, you just don't wing stories. But when you nail it, you come across as a very confident
Mm.
speaker. And whether we like it or not, confidence in public speaking equals confidence in leadership. That's what people think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also important in changing careers. I mean, my first career was as a biologist, and so everything was dry, boring, Latin names, scientific, papers for journals. And then
Hmm.
jumping into a more entrepreneurial space, I had to unlearn that. And I'd be putting together marketing materials, and I'd think, this sounds like a scientific paper. No one's going to read it. And that's why I bought your book, because I have to learn how to unravel that way of thinking and bring up perhaps some uncomfortable things or behave differently in a way that's more vulnerable. And I need a framework to do that in a way that feels safe. And I know that I can then get that message out there without having to rely on this book knowledge.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, you raise a good point. A lot of, whether it's scientific information we're passing on or whether it's just technical business stuff, it's sort of, like I say to people when they're leaders, when they're presenting, okay, you've got all this technical information and data and facts and figures, which is fine. But what about if we just bring it to life through one example of one story? Like if you're sort of saying, 27% of our employees, blah, 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 whatever, then give me an example of one. Just give me an example of one. And I will, often work with leaders and they go, I've got lots of examples. And I go, just give me one. Just find one example of a person that's had an impact of this or whatever and share that story. I only need to know one example, because no one will remember the 27% or whatever. They will remember the story. And it's the only thing they will remember. They will not remember the data. So stories make your messages sticky.
I love that. We're coming to the end of our time today, Gabrielle. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you really wanted to talk about today?
No, I think we've covered a lot. I mean, we could go on for another hour,
I
but
know,
yeah,
this is
just like
amazing. I'm
we
loving this
might have to
conversation.
do part two. But no, I would just say to people, an okay story is better than no story. Like don't aim for perfection. Yes, prepare, but don't over prepare. And get out there and give it a go, because I can guarantee you, you share a story, even if it doesn't land exactly in 100%, it'll still be better than no story.
My takeaway is being able to tell a story equals mental freedom.
Oh, okay.
Not worrying about what people are going to say so much or whether I remember all the facts and figures, but can I engage the audience with a little anecdote? That
Yeah,
suddenly feels lighter and easier for me. So that's how I'm
yeah,
seeing it, is the way to stand out, not be like everyone else, not be obviously an AI
yeah,
churner, but to be interesting. I think we all
yeah.
want to be interesting.
Yeah, when I teach, when I do presentation training, I say to people, start with a personal story, and I go, what do you mean? I go, the first thing out of your mouth is the story we just spoke about, and they went, what? Like I wouldn't even go, I want to tell you a story. No, no, you start, and they're just going, and you can see them thinking, that's really like risky or uncomfortable. No one else does it. And it was like, it is such an engaging way to start your presentation. Like when I do keynotes, I walk on stage and first thing is always a story. Now the story may change depending on what I'm talking about, but straight in it was like, when I was 21, I took up karate, and I go into my story and people are going, what, like it, can you just see it gets people's attention? And then it sets up what you're about to talk about, but they're totally engaged within, you've got them within a minute. You've got them. Well, you got them from the start.
And I heard you doing that today, really role modeling the storytelling. You've told little stories throughout the episode, which I really appreciate. It's been such a great session today. Gabrielle, tell us where we can get your book.
So the book's available on Amazon and Booktopia, and in bookstores, so online in all good bookstores. It debuted at #1, which I'm pretty happy about, in Australia's business books, and it's sitting up there on Amazon's hot new releases in like 4 different categories, like workplace communication, career advice, and stuff. So it's clearly hit the mark and still hitting the mark. I'm on LinkedIn. Connect with me on LinkedIn. My website, gabrielledolan.com. And also, if you love podcasts, have a listen to also Keeping It Real with Jack and Ralph. So you can find me. You can easily find me.
That's awesome. We're going to put those links in the show notes. And thank you so much for your time today. It's been really lovely having a chat to you. And after so many years of reading your book, I'm now finally get to meet you, which is amazing for me.
Excellent. Thanks, Melanie.
Thank you.